Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I've been fishing for over 15 years now, mostly from sandy beaches. It started as a way to cope with stress during college. There's something incredibly peaceful about being alone with your thoughts, watching the sunrise while waiting for fish to bite. Over the years, it became my weekly ritual. Every Sunday morning, rain or shine, you'd find me on some beach with my fishing poles. This Sunday started like any other. I arrived at the beach around 5:30 a.m., choosing a spot close to the parking lot to make hauling my gear easier. The beach stretched for about 5 kilometers, completely empty as usual at this hour. I always make sure to fish either very early or after sunset, even though it's perfectly legal to fish from any beach in my country as long as there aren't any swimmers with umbrellas around. It's just common courtesy, you know. I had been there for about 3 hours, enjoying my coffee and the peaceful sound of waves when a car pulled up next to mine in the empty parking lot. Two older women got out and, to my surprise, walked straight towards me. Now, I was in the middle of reeling in a nice catch, so I didn't think much of it. People often get curious when they see someone fishing, but these women weren't interested in my catch. They walked right between my fishing poles, heading straight for the water. I politely asked them to move about 10 meters away from where I was fishing, explaining that it could be dangerous for them. The first Karen responded dismissively, saying they always swim in that exact spot. I tried to reason with them, explaining that while they could swim there, they just needed to move slightly to either side of my fishing setup. The second Karen jumped in, telling me that I should be the one to move since they always swim there. I attempted one last time to explain that I was already set up and the beach was empty, so it would make more sense for them to move just a bit. But the first Karen insisted that I shouldn't be there at all as it was their swimming spot. They ignored my warnings and continued into the water. Not wanting anyone to get hurt, I started reeling in one of my lines. That's when Karen 1, who was knee-deep in water, barely touched my other fishing line and started screaming like she was being murdered. Both women came charging out of the water, soaking wet only up to their knees, screaming about potential injuries and threatening to call the police. And they did exactly that. When the police arrived, both Karens rushed to them, practically tripping over themselves to tell their story first. The first Karen dramatically claimed that she had almost died because of my fishing, while her friend demanded my immediate arrest for allegedly trying to hurt her companion. When the officer asked how I had tried to hurt her, the first Karen claimed she had been tangled in my line and nearly drowned. The officer asked to see where she had been tangled, and she showed him her completely unmarked arm. The officer pointed out the lack of any marks indicating a struggle, but the second Karen continued to demand my arrest, insisting it was the officer's job. The officer looked at the empty beach, then at the two women who weren't even properly wet, and asked for my side of the story. I explained how they had arrived just 20 minutes ago and deliberately sat next to me despite the empty beach, ignoring my warnings about the fishing lines. The first Karen interrupted, claiming they had been there first, and I had just started fishing. I pointed out that I had been there for almost 3 hours. That's when the officer did something brilliant. He walked to the parking lot and touched both car hoods. Mine was cold from sitting there for hours, while theirs was still warm from their recent arrival. He then told them about the illegality of lying to a police officer and making false accusations. The color drained from both women's faces. The second officer asked them why they would do such a thing, then asked if I wanted to press charges. I agreed, and the first officer instructed the women to put their hands behind their backs for arrest. I spent the next few hours at the police station giving my statement, smelling like fish and definitely not having the relaxing morning I'd planned. Later, one of their children contacted me, being extremely apologetic about their mother's behavior. I ended up dropping the charges, but the incident still went on their record. I doubt they'll try pulling something like this again after such a humiliating experience. The next Sunday, I was back at my usual spot, but this time I brought a small camera to record my fishing sessions. Better safe than sorry, right? Once upon a time, there was me, Jack. I had lost my arm in a tragic accident that happened a few years ago. I was working as a construction worker, and one day, there was a terrible accident on the job site. A crane malfunctioned and a heavy load of steel beams fell on me, crushing my arm. I remember the pain and the shock of what had just happened. I was rushed to the hospital, but unfortunately the damage to my arm was too severe, and the doctors had to amputate it to save my life. I went through months of physical therapy and rehabilitation, learning how to adapt to life with a prosthetic arm. It was a difficult and painful journey, both physically and emotionally, but I was determined to overcome it. I was determined to live my life to the fullest. I had a good job, loving friends and family, and a passion for photography. I felt like I had a pretty good handle on things. I had learned to do almost everything one-handed and even took up photography as a hobby. It helped me cope with my disability and gave me a sense of purpose. One day, while I was out shopping at a department store, my life took a turn for the worse. I was browsing through the aisles, minding my own business, when I heard a voice behind me. It was a woman, and she was not happy. I turned around to see who it was, and it was a lady, and we will call her Karen. She had noticed my prosthetic arm and immediately became very angry and upset. She started yelling at me, saying I was taking up too much space and that I should be ashamed of myself for being disabled. I was taken aback by her words and didn't know how to react. I tried to ignore her and continue with my shopping, but Karen persisted, becoming more and more aggressive. She continued her tirade, telling me I was nothing but a burden on society and that I should just stay at home where I belonged. She even demanded that I cover my prosthetic arm with clothes, calling it an eyesore. I had never experienced such hostility and ignorance before. I tried to brush it off, but the more she spoke, the angrier I became. I couldn't let her get away with this, so I decided to confront her. I stood up for myself, telling her that I wasn't a burden on society. I explained that I had a job, paid taxes, and contributed to the community just like she did. I made it clear that I wasn't ashamed of my disability, that it was part of who I was, and I embraced it. I told her that I would not cover my arm just because it made her uncomfortable. Karen's face twisted in anger, and she threw her coffee at my prosthetic arm. The hot liquid hit me and it felt like a burning sensation. I was in shock and couldn't believe what had just happened. My immediate reaction was to protect my prosthetic arm. I quickly disarmed it and took it off, holding it in my other hand to dry it as soon as possible so it doesn't get damaged for real. I was worried about the damage the coffee could do to the sensitive mechanics and electronics of my prosthetic arm. Karen immediately started screaming for security and police, claiming that I was harassing her and exposing myself in public. She insisted that I had taken off my arm to threaten her. The store manager tried to calm her down, mentioning they had security footage of the entire incident, but Karen dismissed this, demanding my arrest for indecent exposure and assault. The police arrived shortly after. They took statements from both of us and reviewed the security footage. The footage clearly showed Karen's unprovoked attack and my defensive reaction. The store manager had even pulled up footage of Karen doing similar things to other customers in the past. Apparently, she was a known troublemaker who had been banned from several other stores in the area. The police officer told Karen that she was under arrest for assault, filing a false police report, and violating multiple store bans in the district. Karen protested loudly, still trying to play the victim and claiming I had attacked her with my prosthetic arm. The store manager shut her down by pointing out they had everything on camera and that this time they were pressing charges. Karen was arrested and led away in handcuffs, screaming threats about suing everyone. The store manager apologized to me and offered to help clean my prosthetic arm. Several other customers who had witnessed the incident came forward to offer their support and share their own stories about encounters with Karen. A week later, I received a call from the district attorney's office. They were building a case against Karen and wanted to know if I would testify. Apparently, she had been targeting people with disabilities for months, and my incident was the final straw. With the combined evidence from multiple stores and victims, Karen was facing serious charges. I agreed to testify, and in the end, Karen was convicted of multiple counts of assault and harassment. She was sentenced to jail time and mandatory sensitivity training. The judge also ordered her to pay restitution to her victims, including the cost of repairs to my prosthetic arm. The support I received from the store staff, other customers, and the legal system showed me that for every Karen out there, there are many more people who are willing to stand up against discrimination and hate. I grew up on a farm in the Midwest, spending my days helping my father tend to our crops and livestock. Life was simple but fulfilling. I learned the value of hard work, discipline, and most importantly, how to handle firearms safely. Every fall we'd go hunting together, and those experiences taught me more than just marksmanship. They taught me respect for weapons and the importance of following safety protocols. After graduating high school in 2001, I decided to enlist in the Army. It wasn't just about serving my country. I wanted to challenge myself to see what I was truly capable of. The timing of my deployment to basic training couldn't have been more interesting. I arrived at Fort Knox, Kentucky, on my 19th birthday. Talk about a birthday present. The drill sergeants made sure it was a memorable one, all right? As soon as I stepped off that bus, they were in my face, screaming and yelling. I remember thinking to myself, what have I gotten myself into? But that's the thing about basic training. It's designed to break you down before building you back up. The first few weeks were rough, but things started looking up when we reached the basic rifle marksmanship phase. Finally, something familiar. Those years of hunting with my father gave me a solid foundation. While I wouldn't say I was the best shot in our group, I held my own pretty well. Then came qualification day. Our drill sergeants, being the competitive people they were, announced a special prize. The top 2 qualifiers would get to shoot an anti-tank weapon, basically a smaller version of a bazooka. Everyone was pumped, including me, though I only managed to hit 32 targets out of 40. Several others hit all 40 targets, leading to an exciting shoot-off to determine the winners. After the winners were selected, we gathered around for the safety briefing. The instructions were crystal clear. Before firing, you had to announce that the backblast area was cleared to warn anyone behind you to move away from the danger zone. The first winner took his position and followed protocol perfectly. He shouted the safety warning just as we'd been taught, then fired at the old tank sitting 400 yards away. The blast was followed by cheers from all of us, whooping and hollering like excited kids. It was awesome to watch. Then the second winner stepped up. He was getting ready when a young platoon leader walked up and stood directly behind him, about 20 feet away. The drill sergeant told him he needed to move to either the left or right side. The platoon leader responded by walking back about 30 yards and giving a nod, clearly thinking that was enough distance. The drill sergeant raised his voice, telling the platoon leader that he wasn't far enough back. He explained that the effective backblast area was about 100 yards and insisted that the officer needed to move further away. But the platoon leader's face turned red. You could tell he was fresh out of officer training and didn't appreciate being corrected by an enlisted soldier. The platoon leader snapped back, saying he didn't need anyone to teach him things he already knew, and ordered them to continue with the exercise. The drill sergeant got this look in his eyes, the kind that said, "All right, have it your way," and turned to the second winner, telling him to carry on. The poor kid looked terrified, knowing this wasn't going to end well. He called out the safety warning but hesitated, looking back at the platoon leader one more time. That's when the drill sergeant spoke up again, asking the soldier if he hadn't heard the lawful order from the platoon leader, and told him once more to carry on. The kid took a deep breath, aimed at the tank, and pulled the trigger. The blast was impressive, but what happened behind him was even more spectacular. The backblast hit the platoon leader like an invisible wall, knocking him flat on his back. When he finally managed to get up, he could barely stand straight. The drill sergeant announced the all clear with a knowing grin on his face. The platoon leader tried to stare him down, but it's hard to look intimidating when you're swaying like a drunk person. He eventually had to swallow his pride and stumble over to the medic station to get checked out. Word spread quickly through the base about the platoon leader, who learned about backblast the hard way. For weeks afterward, whenever anyone was being stubborn about safety protocols, someone would inevitably bring up the AT-4 incident. That usually shut them up pretty quick. The drill sergeant never got in trouble for it either. After all, he'd given clear warnings, and he was just following the platoon leader's direct orders. I'm a pretty organized person, especially when it comes to grocery shopping. When the virus hit, I adapted quickly and switched to curbside pickup for all our groceries. It became a routine. Every Monday after work, I'd pick up our weekly supplies. If we forgot something, tough luck, we'd wait until next week. It worked perfectly until my partner's cousin came to stay with us for a week. Having a house guest completely threw off our usual schedule. After they left yesterday, we realized we were running low on several essentials. Since we had to pick up my partner's car from the shop anyway, I figured I'd make a quick stop at the store. It wasn't worth paying the curbside fee for just a few items. For once, I actually remembered to bring my reusable shopping bag. It's not much to look at, a faded teal thing with these silly cartoon animals printed on it. The clear coating is peeling off in places, but that actually makes it pretty easy to recognize. I always hang it halfway over the cart side so it doesn't get buried under groceries. The store wasn't too crowded, which was nice. I'd occasionally step away from my car to grab something or wait for someone to move, but never for more than a few seconds. After getting bread and cheese, I headed to produce. That's when I noticed my bag was gone. I muttered to myself that I must have dropped it somewhere. I backtracked all the way to the entrance, checking every aisle, but no sign of it. I wasn't attached to the bag, but I didn't want to make another trip to my car. I figured I'd finish shopping and ask if any employees had found it. That's when I saw her. This woman in her early 30s wearing yoga pants, standing in the checkout line with my bag hanging exactly how I hang mine on her cart. I got closer and sure enough, it was my bag with its distinctive peeling coating and everything. I confronted her with a glare, sarcastically pointing out that she had found my bag that I must have dropped. She started stammering, trying to claim she didn't know it was my cart. I didn't let her finish. I just grabbed my bag off her cart, made sure it was definitely mine, and gave her my best "I can't believe you look," even though I was wearing a mask. Then I went to get my milk. When I got to checkout, I recognized the clerk. We'd chatted a few times before. They greeted me and asked about the commotion they'd witnessed earlier. I explained how the woman had taken my shopping bag right off my cart when my back was turned, and how I'd spotted her with it. I expressed my frustration with people's behavior these days. The clerk agreed, commenting on how some people had real nerve. I was feeling pretty good about catching a thief and standing up for myself. But later, sitting at home, another possibility hit me. What if an employee found my bag after it actually fell off my cart? Maybe they put it on an empty cart, hoping the owner would find it. Then this woman could have just taken that cart, planning to turn in the bag at checkout. The thought that I might have been wrong, that I might have been the entitled jerk in this situation, really bothers me. The worst part is, I'll never know for sure which version is true. All I know is that I publicly confronted someone who might have been completely innocent. Sure, she acted guilty when I confronted her, but wouldn't anyone be flustered if they were suddenly accused of theft? I keep replaying the scene in my head, trying to figure out if I was right or if I just became exactly the kind of person I can't stand. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.